Good evening, and welcome to everybody who has tuned in today. Today's program is being recorded, and any views expressed in this webinar are for general educational purposes only and do not represent any official views or positions of the sponsoring or presenter organizations. Greetings and welcome to today's education program, The Faces of Change Management. This is in collaboration with the Baltimore section, and it's a two-part series. Today is the first part. This is your moderator, Shobha Metal with ASQ Quality Management Division. Today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Sandy and Doug. So welcome Sandy and Doug. Dr. Sandy Furterer is a professor of practice at the Ohio State University. In the Department of Integrated Systems Engineering, she has applied Lean Six Sigma, systems engineering, and engineering management tools in healthcare, banking, retail, higher education, and other service industries, and achieved the level of vice president in several banking institutions. She previously managed the Enterprise Performance Excellence Center in a healthcare system. Dr. Furterer received her PhD in industrial engineering with a specialization in quality engineering from the University of Central Florida in 2004. She received an MBA from Xavier University and a Bachelor and Masters of Science in Industrial and Systems Engineering from the Ohio State University. Dr. Furterer has over 25 years of experience in business, process, and quality improvement. She's an ASQ Certified Manager of Quality and Organizational Excellence, a Certified Six Sigma Black Belt, a Certified Quality Engineer, a Certified Manager of Quality, and Operational Excellence, an ASQ Fellow, and a Certified Six Sigma Master Belt. Dr. Furterer is an author and co-author of several academic and journal articles, conferences, proceedings, and 9 reference textbooks on Lean Six Sigma, Design for Six Sigma, Lean Systems, and Systems Engineering, including being the co-editor for the ASQ CQIA Handbook and the ASQ CMQOE Handbook, and the editor of the ASQ CQPA Handbook. She has also published a textbook on systems engineering, holistic life cycle architecture, modeling and design with real-world application from ICRC Plus. I now move on to our next speaker. Douglas C. Wood has worked over 40 years in the areas of cost of quality, office waste, root cause analysis, performance measurement. He's also helped others with various ASQ certifications in quality auditing, management, engineering. He has also taught auditing, Lean Six Sigma, cost of quality, statistics, and failure modes and effect analysis. He has 4 ASQ certifications, CQE, CQA, SSBD, and CMQOE. He has published the Certified Manager of Quality Organizational Excellence Handbook 5th edition by ASQ, Quality Press, co-edited by Sandy Furterer, the Executive Guide to Understanding and Implementing Quality Cost Programs, Reduce Operating Expenses and Increase Revenue, Principles of Quality Cost, Financial Measures for Strategic Implementation of Quality Management 4th edition. This firm, DC Wood Consulting LLC, has worked with clients in manufacturing, healthcare, and transactional businesses. The company's website is www.dcwoodconsulting.com. And so without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Doug and Sandy. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shobha. That was lengthy. I know we need to kind of trim that, I think. So, in this talk, we're going to talk about several common change management approaches, okay? Because there's more than one. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of each approach. We're also going to discuss our research study on change management, because there's not that much information out there on these different methods. Also, we want to summarize how do you decide on an approach to change management. So, we've come up with these 8 categories of change management approaches. Yes, 8 categories, okay? There's the rational, okay? Strategies and plans. There's the institutional, okay? We follow an industry standard to make change happen. There's the psychological approaches. where change is kind of embedded in people's minds. It's all about psychology. There's the cultural approach, which looks at your culture and values and rites and rituals. There's the biological method, environmental factors. There's the resource-based ones. There's systems-based ones, which looks at the interconnected nature of organizing things and considers stakeholders and components. And then there's the critical ones. Now, we're going to focus on these three tonight. Psychological, systems-based, and cultural. Well, actually four. Also the rational one, okay? So these four: rational, psychological, cultural, and systems-based. So we have these various change management approaches. You probably heard of John Cotter's 8-step leading change. Okay, he's been around a long time. It has got 8 steps. It's leader-oriented. It's a well-established framework, but it's not perfect. There's the ADKAR method. It's been promoted very well. It's been used well beyond industrial applications, and it has a very neat stepwise application. You know, perhaps not good for everyone. We're not going to say it. None of these are perfect for everyone. Then there's Who Moved My Cheese? Now, maybe you've heard of this book. A doctor wrote Who Moved My Cheese as a way, using a parable, to talk your way through how does change happen with people. It's a psychological approach to it. It's a story. It's very understandable, being a story-based run-through, and it would be useful for any change situation. But again, useful, not perhaps ideal. And then there's the Six Sigma thing, the DMAIC. Some people have applied DMAIC to managing change. It's rational, it's cultural, it's psychological, and it is also systems-based. It uses the Six Sigma methodology. It's tool-oriented and structured. It's very well established. But again, it's not perfect for everyone. We've come up with some pros and cons of each of these. You get a copy of the slide deck if you send us an email. You'll get one of these. But in general, I'm going to talk about the cons on each of these, the negative aspects. That might be stronger in deciding which one you should use. The Cotter method is highly reliant on top leaders. It does not have much about preparing to enter your change. And it does not give you a roadmap in case you're a roadmap kind of person. The ADKAR also does not clearly show a roadmap. It's fairly complex to use. The other thing about this is the ADKAR does not iterate. What we mean by that is it doesn't take you through a change and then lead to another change and then lead to another change. So it doesn't do that, if that's something important to you. The Who Moved My Cheese? There's really no clear-cut assessment of progress if you're using this change management. It doesn't have many tools in it if you were looking for tools to guide you in what you're supposed to do. And it really doesn't talk much about how do we measure our results. So it doesn't cover those things well. And DMAIC, DMAIC does not really look closely at human nature. It's a very engineering systems approach. It doesn't look much at neuroscience, and it really doesn't handle the what's in it for me, WIIFM. Hang on a minute. It also does not iterate. And Six Sigma does not address culture barriers, at least how it's applied in most places. So you can see here they each have pros, but they also have cons. And you need to consider these if you're looking at what approach am I going to use.
Doug, and I just wanted to add one more thing to your pros
Yes.
and cons. What has become increasingly apparent as Doug and I have been getting more into this research that we're doing here on change management to try to develop our approach focused on kind of middle managers, because we think from a operational excellence, process improvement, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road as far as they're really responsible for change on operations and processes. But as you can see, as you kind of look at these, and if you know and have used any of these, that they, for what they do, they're good. But then because change is so complex, there's a whole lot of other stuff left out of each one. So like Doug said, Cotter focuses on leadership and what their role is and kind of gives a guiding framework of these are the things that you need to do to really engage people from a leadership and a people perspective. And then we know that DMAIC takes you through a structured problem solving methodology with lots of tools, but doesn't incorporate a lot of, who are the stakeholders, in kind of the bare bones DMAIC. What do they care about? I always incorporate when I'm teaching students that stakeholder analysis so that you can really think about who are the stakeholders, what do they care about, what are their concerns, what are their CTQs, and how do we get them to change? Kind of the GE breakout perspective, if you've been familiar with that. And then I really think the Who Moved My Cheese is a lot more on that psychological, but then it kind of falls down on the approach. So what I think is really a key takeaway of these and why we wanted to kind of throw these out here is they're good for lots of things and they're not so good on other things. And part of that is because I think the people who kind of developed these had a purpose in mind and met that particular purpose, but didn't necessarily make it robust enough so that it's really going to be highly effective. And that's what Doug and I are trying to do. Of course, we'll kind of talk about it from a research perspective a little later of how difficult and complex that becomes.
There's some views out there that leading change, a change leader, a top level executive, is at a dramatic disadvantage in making change happen. In that change happens at the workplace, on people's desks, and in their heads. And a top level executive, especially at a large company, cannot know what people are doing and thinking. It's too far away from their day to day. And they shouldn't. I mean, should the CEO know what the people at the bottom level of the company are doing every day? It's not likely, not possible. And so because the change has to happen deep and the top leaders are somewhat separate from them, it makes it really hard for the leaders to drive a change in a direction of their vision if their vision does not already understand what everybody is doing. Okay? So there's a huge gap between there, all right? So let's talk about these rational approaches, some of the pros of these things. They're led by managers and leaders based on strategies and plans. And I want to reiterate here something Sandy mentioned. John Cotter talks about, the name of his book, Leading Change. But there's also managing change. Those aren't the same thing. We know that. Leading and managing are not really the same thing. So again, these rational approaches will work when you don't have massive emotional burdens that you have to overcome. Rationality and emotionality, those are both present in everybody. And if your change is logical, then okay. But not all these things are. I know a number of people are asking for the presentation. Email me at the end. I will send them to you. Now there's the psychological approaches. Some of the good things about this, okay? in this, change is embedded in the minds of those affected. And you might think, well, all change has to be there, okay? And you know, who moved my cheese? That's a good one. And another one is We Move Our Own Cheese. I don't know if you've heard of that book. That was a follow-on book. You'll get the references to all these materials at the end. We Move Our Own Cheese was put together by a friend of mine, Vic Sauer, after Who Moved My Cheese. And he was thinking of it not from the standpoint of the doctor looking at psychology, but looking at it as a middle manager. If you're in the middle and you have to become a change agent, how you don't have full authority. How can you be a change agent, okay, if you can do change from the middle? So that's another ASQ publication. We Move Our Own Cheese. Now, the systems-based cultural approach. This is change through culture, including rites and rituals, and using the interconnected organization you've got, considering stakeholders and components. Again, can be done. It can be really complicated, okay, to do this, but it's adaptable. It has people know what Six Sigma is, and it does help drive permanent change. Now, Six Sigma is not ideal for all organizations. Some organizations they don't like Six Sigma because it seems less flexible. Okay, it's too, air quotes around this, too engineering-like. Okay? And they don't like it. A number of healthcare delivery institutions have tried Six Sigma and decided it's not for them. So again, it can work or not. So what's the impact of a failing change effort? Everybody wants improvement, but nobody wants change to be done to them. Is this true? When changes are done to us and they fail, it actually creates what I'm calling cultural toxicity. It makes the work culture worse. That's a real risk if you get into one of these things and they don't work. Now, I'm going to mention something here. You might find some statistics floating around out there that says, 70% of all change efforts fail. I've looked at that closely. Sandy and I have looked at that closely. And as far as we can tell, that there's no data to support that 70% of all change efforts fail. No data. It seems that statistic was promoted by a consulting firm that wanted to sell their guidance for change management, okay? So there really isn't any data out there. However, we do know, because many of us have been in failed change management approaches, we know that it does create a toxic residue. It's Sandy and my belief that we should use the tools of quality to seek a change management approach that is more likely to be successful. And this is something we have not seen in literature. So, what's been our approach? How did we go about doing this?
I'll jump in, Doug.
Go on, yeah.
Okay, so this has been really pretty fascinating. So Doug came to me, I think it was last year already, and we had done the CQPA. We had done, was it 9, I think, different webinars for the Certified Quality Process Analyst handbook, and he said, "What do you want to do next?" Like he talked about, and I'm kind of like, I'm thinking in my mind, just say no, but. Unfortunately, I don't do that well. And I thought it was very fascinating that Doug threw out there change management. And I had been teaching a leadership and change management course in one of our programs, and it's huge. I mean, we actually combined both leadership and change management. And you can imagine, it'd be difficult to do either really well. Um, so and there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of, like you saw, these different approaches out there, but and there's a lot of research out there. But again, just the whole nature of research is biting off a little bit and and then testing it and then trying to see if it works and then kind of iterating that. And so that's what we're doing. So we had an initial attempt at a pilot study, with looking at, well, first, of course, basing this in the literature and looking at, what have people learned, over the last, um, long period of time, really, in the literature about valid approaches and what are the elements and attributes that are going to help with change management. And so that was the first step, is to really look at that literature, and we're really still doing that. Doug's going to talk on the next slide about some initial observations that we have, but we really need to step back and really do that in a more systematic way. So we're going to do that. And then we started a pilot study using the Kano analysis, which looks at kind of perceptions of quality attributes. And what we realized there is we got some kind of strange, confusing results in the pilot study. And because you always pilot your survey to see if it's assessing what you think it is, and it really wasn't. Again, because we identified, which you'll see some quality attributes from the literature that we think are important, but we think that it's just too simplistic. So we're going to take a little bit of a step back, and we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to try to incorporate, kind of the experience and experiential aspect of people. And that's why I'm so glad we've got so many people here, because if you have experience in change management and you want to be interviewed, or willing to be interviewed, and or take some of these surveys as we get them together, please again reach out to Doug and I. And so we want to understand people's experience, because that is so important. And then we want to develop some surveys so that, because you're going to interview, a handful of people really, from a time perspective. And then you're going to, develop the survey questions and go out to a broader audience of what are the aspects or the quality attributes, what are the important ones, and then, do another survey where we have people rank them. So kind of the Delphi technique there. And then we should be able to, with all of that good information and people's experience, we should be able to start developing a change management approach. Now we've got a kind of initial thought of what some of the factors are, and you'll see that as well. And then the last thing, we really want to then test that real world, that approach in real world case studies, to validate the approach. So this is really, multi-step. It's going to be complex, but we think that there'll really be something that incorporates more than just kind of a slice of a view, and incorporates really the important elements. Are, just looking at environmental factors, which a lot of these approaches don't do, looking at, like Doug talked about, the psychological and the cultural. And I think those, as I get more into the research, and I'm getting and having a lot of experiences over the last several years, and a lot in change management, process improvement, and just in organizations, that it's really, the people that can be a barrier to the change, and and the politics and the culture and all of that. And so how do we set the people up for success who are trying to make change happen? And, there's been more on kind of toxic work environments that affect culture, lack of trust. We know we almost all work on teams, so there's a lot of aspects there. And then there's a lot of contextual aspects, such as, what is the type of change? Is it a software change? Is it a technology change? Is it an innovative change? Is it something transformational? Is it this? What's the scope of the change? Is it huge? Is it cross-disciplinary? Is it going to be aligned to the strategy? And then what are the resources, skills, and experiences that are available? So lots of context, and that's where those real world case studies are going to be able to help us to put things into context.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the next one's the literature then.
yeah, that absolutely. You can see why both of us are in this, because I think this is bigger than what one person can easily accomplish. So we did some literature review. We began by looking at the popular texts. Cotter, Spencer, who did the Who Moved My Cheese, Sauer and Fair, who did the We Move Our Own Cheese, Hyatt, who did the EDCAR, okay? And we mapped these against Cotter's seminal work, which seemed to be the core of where people were going. But there were gaps, okay? Such as assessing the organizational culture for change readiness, okay? Rick Maurer was another one we looked at. He had his 3 levels of resistance and change model. Brian Palmer has done a number of great articles talking about making change work. One of the things we discovered in our literature search was, and these are all in the resources at the end, the Effective Change Manager. This is by the Change Management Institute. I don't know how many of you heard of them. They used a body of knowledge approach to change management. Again, it's a marvelous book. It's got 13 or 16 chapters, and it covers a lot of ground. Another book that we came across was just absolutely wonderful. David Owen's book, Creative People Must Be Stopped: 6 Ways We Kill Innovation. And again, that doesn't sound like change management, but it has a lot of tools in it, and that was another good resource. So we looked at all these different books and articles by different people, including Stephen Warrilow did a critique of John Cotter, just an article that came out. Okay, so third, our next step, we started mapping these approaches against Cotter's work, as I said, but we found just too many gaps in Cotter's work, as well as additional aspects the other approaches had created. Part of this could be because Cotter was looking at leading change, and many of these others were looking at managing change. So it was really clear that we need a practical approach based on how do you choose a change management strategy, okay? And so we entered this Kano analysis. As Sandy mentioned, it turns out that this is such a complex topic that Kano analysis did not result in giving us a lot of good information. Okay, so we've created a list of 7 quality attributes, and Sandy, that might be 8 quality attributes now. We'll talk about that when we get to that slide. This kind of allows us to figure out where we're going to go next. We've looked at all these approaches. We've consulted with several of our colleagues who've been practicing change management. So the results from these surveys and this research will be used to develop a more ideal change management approach, or selection process for change management. And we're hoping that this will help in running a change management effort. And we're going to do that webinar in September. And again, our longer range plan is to work on these case studies to validate the use of how this new approach, how this assembled change management approach might work. So again, Sandy?
Yep. So I talked about this a little bit, but just to kind of reiterate. So after the more detailed literature review, we're going to look at the importance model. And this is to identify what are the things, what are the elements, what are the quality attributes based on the experience of people who do change management. What do they see as important as they're making change happen? either from a positive, a success, or from a failure. So kind of both perspectives. And then we'll create a pilot survey, test that out, and then we will send that out more broadly. Next slide. Then once we have that, the next iteration is to develop a survey from the identified important attributes and rank them. So which are most important? There's a lot that are important. So kind of what is the order of importance of those? And then we would send that survey again. Go ahead. And then from that, and of course, I wasn't, I had mentioned earlier, we will be interviewing experts as part of the kind of coming together from literature and experience. And we'll then develop the change management approach based on those ranked attributes. And then we'll validate through case studies. And this is where it'll help to get more of the context of the different change events that happen. And so, and we will also be assessing the success or the failure. So Doug had mentioned there was some random statistic that people have been quoting for forever, but it's going to be important to really assess going forward, are these elements important, and are they helping to improve the success of change happening?
So I don't know if Sandy or I were going to do this. These are 7 attributes, and Sandy, one of them I think is actually 2. Is that second bullet?
Yes.
First of all, what is the pre-change assessment of organizational readiness? This seemed to come out of a lot of the literature. Okay, you've got to get ready for making change happen. And that was one of the critiques of John Cotter's work. The second bullet, I think, is 2. Is this procedure about leading change? And the second bullet would be, is this about managing change? Those are 2 different activities. They're not really the same thing at all. If you're a CEO, you're looking at leading things. And if you're a middle manager, you're looking at managing how that works out. Sandy, what you want to do the rest?
Yeah, I was going to speak to something that struck me when I was looking at the active and consistent top leadership support. And as you talked about Cotter, there's also going to be aspects of these elements that are like, this is like the basic foundation of what has to happen. So I think most of us with our experience has said, if top leadership wasn't on board, you might as well forget it. Vocally on board, going around saying, hey, we have implemented this new process improvement effort, operational excellence, or maybe it's the new customer relationship management software. The leadership has to vocally communicate with everyone that this is what we're going to do, or else it just won't happen. So there's some things like that it's just a given, it's a foundational aspect, and you just have to have it there or nothing's going to move the needle. Whereas other things could be kind of a continuum where this, including psychology for individuals and groups, understanding the culture, understanding where people are, how do we enhance trust? There's a continuum of trust. So there must be trust, but how much trust and those people aspects. So maybe that's a continuum. Looking for unforeseen situations, being able to, this is kind of more along the managing change. How can we manage for risk events? Identifying what are the potential risks? How can we adapt an approach from a context perspective for the smaller organizations, the unique organizations? So many of we've got percentages of people that are employed at smaller companies all over the world, and yet so much of these types of efforts are focused on very big companies. So how can we focus them on the right places, the middle managers, the smaller and unique companies, and then which of the tools are really super important. One thing that also strikes me, and I think some of the most successful Six Sigma or Lean efforts has been that I've been a part of have been focused and really improved with really good PMI trained project managers that can really track the heck out of all of your action items. Because one particular project that I worked on in a hospital in the surgery center to improve turnaround times, we took months engaging everyone in the surgical suite with trying to identify the best and most robust turnaround process. And we documented it, we standardized it, we videoed it, the whole thing. And we thought there was a small team of us process improvements, so they're improvement people, there were just 3 of us. We thought, okay, they're implementing this. We went another 6 months and realized we were having weekly meetings, but nobody was really changing anything. Nobody was making sure that people were trained, making sure that this was part of their performance evaluation, the whole thing. So which of these tools are we using? How are we making that change happen, and how are we monitoring it all? So these are some of the things that getting the aspects of really good change. Again, I'm almost thinking PMI is just a given. It's not there consistently. Healthcare actually is one of the areas that does that well, where they usually embed process improvement or lean right in what they call the project office or the project management organization. So do IT organizations. That is something that's really super insightful and really powerful. So maybe other organizations, if they haven't done that, that might be something that can be done. So. All right, and I'll kind of speak to these. This is kind of, again, what we're trying to move to. So again, you can probably ignore the quality attributes because these are going to change a lot. But there'll be a list of our quality attributes. There'll be an importance of these. There'll be a ranking. And then we're going to identify whether we want to include it in the approach. So we're going to think big. We're going to identify a lot of attributes so that the people who take the survey can identify the importance and the ranking. And then there may be some that just aren't as important as others and aren't as critical. Again, could be some that are a given, have to be there, foundational, and then there's other ones that, depending on the context, you might be able to have less of that.
So I can maybe speak to this one, Sandra.
Sure.
Looking at these attributes, again, the attributes are tentative, but mapping them against these 4 well-known approaches, you can see that some of them are just absolutely excellent at it. You know, Ed Carr is excellent with psychology. He's got a lot in there about that. The DMAIC, the DMAIC, Six Sigma, it's got a lot of tools in it, okay? But then you look over here at cheese, you know, who moved my cheese, and you look at Cotter, and they don't have anything to do with tools. One of them that seems to avoid top leadership support is who moved my cheese. It's kind of an interesting look at that. I'm not sure. There seemed to be a gap in that one. But so you can see here that we're kind of all over the map when it comes to how these well-established approaches actually fit the criteria. In talking to some of our collaborators who have done a lot of change, one of the comments that we heard routinely was, well, I pick and choose between different ones depending on what an individual client needs to use. This is coming from a consultant on change. I will pick and choose what a particular client needs to have. So apparently no one of these is universally acceptable in 100% of the cases. Sandy?
Yep. No, I agree with that. Yeah, so this is really good. This is a fantastic summary of those different approaches that we've already looked at. Thank you. Oops, this is mine. Um,
Yep.
but Doug and I have gotten much braver as we've done these seminars together. We used to split the presentation in half, and then he'd take the first part and I'd take the last, or vice versa. But now we try to kind of go back and forth, and it makes it more exciting. But anyway, so this was an initial view of kind of the change model. So what we're going to have a lot of elements. We know we'll have a lot of elements in this change approach. Definitely having a methodology is going to be really important. And then incorporating many of the attributes that we've talked about will also be important. So if you look at this, the kind of the initial view was to look at scanning the environment, understanding those environmental, people, and context types of issues. And then hopefully there'll be some type of framework or model that helps us to kind of navigate the context factors there. And then we all know how critical it is from the communication, and also I think the mission, vision, and values of the change effort or the transformation or the innovation. This will be especially important as we put in new and innovative types of technology. You know, the AI is everywhere, right? Well, what are the organization's vision and values of incorporating that technology and that transformation? I think that's really important, and sometimes that is missing, and it can help us to provide that leadership vision if you have those visions and values set up. And then the gaining the support within the organization, understanding the stakeholders, understanding their receptivity, understanding the what's in it for me. Next step would be developing and deploying the change initiative infrastructure. There's going to be a lot of the infrastructure that's going to need to be in place. If you don't have trust in your organization, that's going to have to be part of that infrastructure. If your teams don't know how to work together, don't have a lot of training, if there's toxicity in the work environment, that stuff has to get worked on before change can be effective. The assessing cultural and organizational readiness for change. So again, incorporating the culture aspect. Is the organization ready? Developing the change and communication plans, implementing managing change. It's almost like, oh, that'll be easy once you have all these other factors set in your organization and you have the infrastructure to make the change happen. And then this is really where a lot of the PMI piece comes in, the creating and implementing control and maintaining plans.
It's important, I think, to remember, as they say in the military, that no plan survives contact with the enemy. And you may make a lot of plans, but it's that implementing and controlling that must be done. Okay? Now, there's some comments on there about cheese. No, I think Who Moved My Cheese is great from an inside psychological standpoint. I think it's a good one, but changes groups of people and doesn't cover all the things, I think. So, our next webinar in September, we're going to be continuing with our literature and research. We absolutely want any of you who would like to be interviewed to give us your thoughts in depth. If you're a change management, high level of change management expertise, Sandy and I want to hear from you. I mean, it takes more than one head to make sense out of this. So contact us. Send us an email, okay? Because there's a lot of people here, and we're not going to be able to reach out to just everybody. Secondly, when we prepare our next survey on the attributes and the importance, we're going to ask if you will volunteer to take our survey. Again, send us an email, okay? Okay, and finally, we're going to finish up our research with the not just importance, but also the ranking. So there'll be a second stage to that. Sandy? Cesar Rios has raised his hand.
Yeah. Again, just to reiterate what Doug said, I can't reiterate enough how important it is to get as many people engaged in this effort. Your interest in all of these, I was just looking at all the wonderful questions and comments here in the chat, which I was copying and pasting for myself, because I think it's so valuable and so helpful. We do have some time to answer some questions, right, Doug?
Yeah, I think we do. I want to show the list of references, which you will get with the slide deck. Again, email us, and we will send you a copy of the slide deck in PDF form. Here's our contact information. And Sandy, don't have your email address on this slide.
Oh, let me put it in the chat.
She'll put it in the chat. All right.
Everybody can see the chat, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll put my Gmail.
Right. Thank you, Doug and Sally, so much. We will stop recording and we'll go right into the questions and answers.
Okay, good.